Welcome to another episode of VNture Podcast, your weekly source of visual novel goodness. I am MR, and together with Tauros, we shall venture into another discussion about VNs. Today we have an episode dedicated to humor, gags and skits found in our favorite media. We'll talk about how the comedy manifests itself in VNs, along with some examples, and explain how it works on us and hopefully not kill the joke in the process. With that out of the way, Tauros, please bring us to your first example.
Hello everyone, and yes, thank you MR. I wanted to talk about a few titles that aren't quite as popular as some of the mainstay comedy examples, and one of which that popped into my mind was Yojin Bo. This one is technically an otome game, actually. Main character is a high school girl. She is on an archaeology trip investigating some ruins where a princess long ago fell victim to an assassination attempt. And so she goes back home, and overnight she wakes up in the princess's body hundreds of years ago. And with some quick thinking, she manages an escape, and the rest of the story is her trying to survive and get back to her own time while she has several samurai bodyguard hunks as protection. And that's typically what you'll see for any online summaries of the plot, a few reviews, or information about this VN. But what none of them tell you is that every character is such a hammy, over-the-top jokester. It's hilarious that you have all of these characters, and a lot of the romanceable guys involved fit into standard character tropes. You've got like the hot-blooded guy, the older guy, the cool and elegant one, and the token evil teammate. But all of them are just cracking silly jokes and taking the piss out of everything. And what's even more spectacular is that throughout the entire title, everyone is making like current day pop culture references. Yeah. Like this is supposed to be a period piece of like samurai and ninjas and this Ojo-sama being protected through the realm of Japan. And yet they're all talking about, oh my god, stuff like modern day TV shows like Grey's Anatomy, making comparisons to Harry Potter. It's
In one of the screenshots that scroll in the background, I saw the Forrest Gump reference.
I know, right? Now, usually, like if you're gonna see a visual novel make a fourth wall break, sort of ridiculous reference like that, it'd just be a one-off line and it would just be ignored. But no, like this entire visual novel just dedicates itself to being as ridiculous as possible.
You honestly on it.
Consistently. You can't go like a dozen lines without someone making a wisecrack. I remember I booted up this VN, and we get through the introduction, and then she winds up being warped back in time, and we made it like five lines in before some random character acted like this is just like the opening to Grey's Anatomy. And I had to stop and just pause. And staring at the screen like, wait a second, was this some kind of translation nonsense? I thought we're back in time to like feudal Japan. Did I misread that? And then I read forward a bit longer, and it's like, oh my god, no, everyone's making silly examples. One of them's talking about how hot Daniel Radcliffe is.
Okay, I see.
Someone else mentions how we can't show blood because then the ESRB would get on our case.
Oh yeah.
I can't confirm it. I don't remember exactly, but I'm pretty sure they made a Rants reference too.
Fair enough. Okay. They are self-aware about being a VN.
Oh my god.
Okay. I mean,
absolutely.
First, a thing that came to my mind when you were describing the premise, right, was how close or far, obviously, it is to isekai, because one of the isekai tropes that tends to be a recurring thing is the protagonists tend to know about the isekai tropes, or at least that's a recent trend. So, and now you talk about someone transported back in time with those characters being aware of the modern times. You see the dissonance that I'm going on with.
Yeah, so I mean, this is kind of sort of in isekai. I wouldn't go that far because, with isekais, it's always a fantasy land.
Yes.
And in this case, it's more like a period piece.
Fair enough.
Time traveling, and now she needs to get back to her own realm. Or not quite realm, but her own modern day Japan, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, there are similarities, of course. And part of that is with her gaggle of bodyguards who are all romanceable. And in that way, because it's not purely a comedy, Yojimbo also has, serious scenes and a few action moments, and then obviously a few romance moments as well, as you'd expect out of an otome period piece. But just peppered all throughout, you'll see references to stuff that you would not expect. And on the one hand, it kind of does take you out of the plot because it's such a ridiculous thought to pop into your mind. But on the other hand, number one, definitely it makes Yojimbo unique. But it really highlights the serious moments, I guess you could say. How it's like, oh, okay, wait, no, this is serious plot stuff. And then you get gripped into the story. And then you get taken out and you can laugh all over again.
That's a very, very unique blend, I have to admit to you, because I'm trying to imagine that in my head. On one hand, you try to establish, and just to note, my first intuition was isekai. I wasn't pushing it to fit that description. Like you said, it's more about time slip kind of story, being put back in time somehow, some convenient way. But it takes away the immersion when they break the formula and create the dissonance of knowing the modern culture yet being in the feudal Japan period. But on the other hand, if they do it consistently, does it go so far over the top that it loops back around and you immerse yourself again?
Partially, yeah.
In a way.
The only person who isn't being ridiculous in this whole scenario is the main character. She has one expression. That's her being exasperated. And I swear, you see it in the bottom left corner of the screen, like for half of this BN.
Okay, she's just tired of this.
So I think, I know, right? She's she's the straight woman in this whole comedy routine.
Okay.
And I think, of course, as with any, straight character, she's someone to bounce off all the ridiculousness going on.
Yeah, she basically amplifies all the wackiness by just reacting like a normal person, like, oh my god, really?
So when you mention, being immersed into this world, I think a big part of it is that the main character is someone to be immersed in. You know how some people will talk about self-inserts?
Yes.
And the main characters are some varying degrees of their own character, or a blank slate, or someone the reader can really identify with.
Yeah.
And so, of course, you have the main character in Yojimbo being someone you can self-insert as, just marveling at how insane everything's going on around her.
And yet she exhibits a common sense you as a reader would have being put in that position. I get it. Yeah, fair enough.
And Yojimbo has a few other problems for this VN. It's pretty... I want to say it was released sometime in the early 2000s. So it has a few problems, especially with some of its choices leading to bad ends, like
I see.
2 hours before it's apparent. And
Whoa.
it's like, ugh. I know, right? Some older titles are so cruel about their choices that lead to bad ends. I don't understand why you do that to your reader. But anyways, you still see it nowadays sometimes too. Crazy.
Yeah, I'm not the biggest fan of bad endings in general, but to set up a bad end flag early in reading and then execute the consequence so far off is just cruel. Yeah.
So if you want to read this, use a guide, everyone.
Okay.
But as for you, MR, you mentioned isekais. Do you have anything resembling one?
Yes, I do.
As a comedy.
Do.
Is that
it's
so?
a comedy, yes. I brought in Crystalline. I have very few opportunities to talk about English-only visual novels. This is one of those. It is actually also an isekai. It features the Western-inspired isekai world and conveniently transported protagonist there for unknown reasons, and he tries to go back home. So a very, very typical isekai setting. Now, what sets it apart and why I chose this title specifically is that it boasts a lot of parodies from modern Western culture. Like references serialized shows such as Breaking Bad and tries to incorporate characteristic of people appearing in that show into that world, obviously accommodating for the differences in the world. This one having magic and alchemy instead of them creating less than legal drugs. It also parodies some iconic fictional characters from other media, like comic books, X-Men, or from another anime, like they obviously being isekai, they parodied Kirito from Sword Art Online. They had to pay homage to the original. Also, some of the, just like in Yojimbo, you had self-aware of its VN heritage. This title also specifically targeted Dangos, a pet from Clannad, from Key fame, and based upon that characteristic of a blobby, slimy creature pet, they cranked up their characteristic and their how can I say the most? They gave so much more character to the formless blob whenever they could, and made a parody of those pets in VNs. And they have many, many more, but for the sake of it, and for those who are interested to read, I highly recommend it. It's not that long. For those who resonate with a lot of Western culture references or twists on the formulas, it's pretty funny, to be honest. I cracked a few grins during this read. Especially, I think what stuck me the most, with all that said, I think the choices system was the one that broke me. Because I realized how pointless choices are in mostly linear stories, and they made sure to incorporate humor in the choices themselves. Meaning, there's a typical situation that you have to deal with, and you have the edgy answer, the cocky answer, the over-the-top 3-line of text answer that is very specific and you want to sound smart, something like that. None of them matter, but just for the sake of it, they incorporated those.
Okay, so instead of the choices being like gameplay important, these choices are more so like video game conversation branches where you can just pick what kind of response you want to give. Like I'm looking at one of the screenshots and it's like, what kind of one-liner do you want to give at the end of a climatic battle?
Exactly.
Okay.
I don't want
to... it's playing it more for comedy instead of for gameplay.
I don't want to negate that there are non-branching choices, because some of those are there in the game. But mostly what you talked about Yojimbo is kind of reverted here, because the humor comes from the protagonist and the others react to protagonist. So by giving you the choice, you basically choose, I want to see how they react to this. And then you hear the main girl, who plays the straight man in this exchange, react to, what? What do you mean vegan or something like that, because you chose the crazy vegan option. So the relationship between the one who jokes and the one who plays it straight is reverted from your example.
Okay.
Ultimately, I don't remember the story being that impactful or engaging, but the humor won me over. And like I said, especially with the choice, so those were fun. One more thing to highlight is it was fully voiced, and they had a really good voice acting, I would say.
Do you think voice acting makes the funnier parts funnier?
Definitely. I think voice actors were aware of the tone and played into it. Exaggerated voice and trying to play super straight, like, what? How would you say it? Like, though that did amplify it, in my opinion. The overall
nice.
Impact.
Because with voice acting, there's a lot more, I guess you could say, direction to it that the devs need to give them.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you end up with a very mismatched performance.
Yeah.
And it's the little things that you don't realize as a reader or as a listener.
True.
But when you're developing the VN, there's all sorts of considerations for each character.
Yeah, I completely agree.
All right, then, yeah, that's great to hear that it worked out so well for Crystalline. I haven't checked it out, but like you said, it is an OELVN, right? It's Western developers?
Yes, it's Western. It is English only visual novel.
Interesting. I'm always down to check those out.
Yeah. Now that you mentioned voice actor, and I set in stone the relation between the jokester and the straight man, remember, it's not the exaggerated voices, so not the jokester plays into its role, because if I remember correctly, the protagonist is mute. So there's silent protagonist kind of deal for the immersion factor. But the reaction force, the straight man is the one who delivers the reaction to your setup.
All right. Then on that note, if you are finished talking about Crystalline,
pretty much,
I can go off into another visual novel that made me laugh out loud several times.
Oh yeah.
Hatoful Boyfriend.
Oh god.
I always like talking about this VN because there's so much to you can approach it from any angle. That's why. But for anyone who may not be aware, Hatoful Boyfriend is a VN where you are a normal high school girl attending a high school just for pigeons. And it's set in a very strange world where pigeons are just as intelligent as humans. And so this poor high school girl attends a very strange high school and perhaps finds love along the way with all of the other pigeon boys there. And it's a very silly premise. There's really no way around it. How can you tell a story where the sprites are entirely just static PNGs of pigeons?
True.
I can't stress enough how they have no expressions.
Yep. Yes, exactly.
They're just static. They stay that way and they stare at you the entire time.
It's not the
backgrounds.
Yeah. It's not the first time we bring Hatoful Boyfriend, because it does a lot of things right, and we acknowledge that.
But of course, absolutely.
I don't know how to emphasize that every single time when we start talking about Hatoful Boyfriend. I am always starting smiling immediately. You mentioned that name, or I start. It's like grin up immediately because I do remember it was such a romp along the way. There were so many great moments, and one point you either neglected to mention or you wanted to is, despite the human going to all pigeon school, the frame is that girl is the stupid one. She
is the primitive caveman hunter-gatherer
exactly
living in a cave.
exactly.
But even if you say that, where she is treated as the dumb human and you have all of these intelligent birds, even then there's still one bird called Oko-san who is just completely loony.
Yep.
Who seems to be just obsessed with pudding and is very athletic, runs really fast, and doesn't quite communicate with all of the other birds.
Yeah.
And yet, I believe, if I remember right, the main character treats this pigeon with respect as her superior.
Exactly. Yep. Yes.
But I love how you mentioned that, how it seems so much like a joke. And because the visuals and the music and obviously the sprites all play into that, where it seems very low effort.
Yeah.
You have basic backgrounds and the music is, they're all free use, royalty-free music.
Exactly.
So it seems like something that was unironically created in RPG Maker, but there's a lot of story to it. All of the character routes go super far into these poor characters and the problems they're dealing with, and you get a bunch of sad and happy endings along the way too, including some very emotional scenes as well.
Yeah.
But all throughout the common route and in several of the individual character routes, it's very funny along the way.
It's so creative in different setups it creates. I vividly remember all the, how can I say, biker gang arc. That was so hilarious to me consistently, especially how
Oh, yeah, and the biker gang prioritized safety.
Yes!
Always drive under the speed limit.
Yes, that was so cool. And despite all of that, their names were like, Blaster, remember to drive safety. Oh, yeah. Oh.
It's very silly. It does not take itself seriously until it does.
Yeah.
And by then, you're not prepared for it. And
True.
It's like, oh my goodness, I'm crying over this pigeon.
Yeah, they lured you in with the humor, with the jokes, and how that parodies inversion of what is a Neanderthal and what is an intelligent race. And then when you least expect it, like, oh, that actually was emotional. I'm like, oh.
I'm not so sure I would recommend it as a first visual novel to new readers. Because on the one hand, it's the sort of thing where after you have a few titles under your belt and you're aware of some of those stereotypes and cliches and low effort feels to it, you can kind of appreciate what it's going for more.
Exactly, yeah.
But I know a lot of people were first introduced to the world of visual novels through Hatofu Boyfriend because it was such a huge fad and it exploded as a shitpost. But it's not.
I think
there's all sorts of people who read it and then realized that, oh my goodness, there's a whole world of stories like this.
Yeah. I think 2 points to what you just mentioned. One, when it comes to parodying an established genre game, the more you are in that style, the more you are in on the joke itself, right? It goes hand in hand. So to go as a first title for this is like, maybe you'll still have the laughs because the setup is that absurd. but maybe you'll not get the references and what it's parodying and why it's parodying it specifically. In popularity, I guess Steam helped a lot. The idea that it was on Steam and it being the premise sells it very well for, in my opinion, a single playthrough. Like for a complete random who reads that.
Single. What do you mean by that?
A single, or I guess read through if you don't consider playing a VN, play through, meaning I want start, end, experience the joke, get an ending, goodbye. A lot of people did that.
Oh, wow, really?
Yeah. And
I know that's how some people approach their, romance stories
True.
and whatnot, but in Hatoful Boyfriend, there is very much a true ending that you should see.
yeah, and we keep bringing it up. And there's a reason for it, because it's very good. but I there's quite a lot of requirements to go there, and not everybody resonates with the joke of being in the old pigeon school that well on repeated playthroughs. So for some, the jokes were thin on the second and third tries. That's my point.
Okay, but I see what you mean then.
But the ease of access, I think it's one of the earlier VNs that was featured in a lot of bundles and sales. That also pretty much helped to spread.
It was cheap.
Yeah, I mean...
And the closer you're being free, the more accessible it is to everyone.
And this VN, more than any other, although maybe Doki Doki is also in this category, shows the power of memes. If the memes are funny and easily spreadable, meaning you can share image, and on top of that you can gift your friend a cheap visual novel, it will work, right?
Haha, yep.
And then you can say, I got him with a hateful boyfriend.
But that was an example that was pretty well popular to everyone involved.
True.
You mentioned something that I wasn't really familiar with as one of your examples, MR. What did you have to say?
Well, for the next example, I prepared Mekonin, X-Heart. This is a unusual title. It similar to how Hatoful Boyfriend got popularized by the ease of memes, its shareability. I believe the hype train of Nekopara. It's a visual novel about ninja cat girls trained in the old way of clans and the servitude in the feudal Japan. But the twist is they try to accommodate that to a modern world. It uses tropes surrounding cat girls, obviously, and such as like their neko speech, territorial behavior, urges, for example, such as when they see tuna, they hop onto it. They use ninjas, for example, ninjutsu, very popular in anime, ability to sneak, undetectable, and probably my favorite one is the climbing walls and ceilings. A little bit more on that later. And it ties it all together neatly with the disconnect between how modern day operates and how the old days were. And the biggest one was such as there is no need for ninjas in the modern world. There is no danger of being assassinated and you need your ninja on you all the time. I think this is one of those, how can I say, one note humor VNs that by reading it, I was thinking, will the joke run old? But they kept finding ways to reinvigorate one joke in particular, the ceiling one. The idea is product. finds 2 ninja cat girls. They join him, live with him in the house, but he still has to attend school. They are not in school. So how do they follow him? They follow him on the rooftops, on the lamps on their way, and in the school they walk around in ceiling all the time. And the VN
to stay hidden from everyone else.
Exactly. And
Oh,
the
my goodness.
VN acknowledges that and draws them at the top of your screen, upside down. And the way they keep playing with the joke. First, they, those 2 ninja cadres, keep talking about how they interpret Protac doing things. So, for example, he's snoozing in the school. Oh, God, the Lord has to be tired from all those assassination attempts. I understand. I'll be on the guard. Obviously, they're being catgears and fighting for attention. They try to, how can I say, lure him into hearing them or looking at them. So they try to take attention away from him listening to studies and studying in school to looking at the ceiling. But he has to keep internal focus and composure because, okay, if I look at the ceiling and everybody else spots them, I'll be in trouble. I can't look at it. So they intensify it. And that's the joke.
Oh, dear.
And as it is with series, because this is not a single title VN, it has like 5 titles at this point. Quite a lengthy series.
Oh, wow. I didn't know there were that many.
Yeah, it is. So they did introduce new characters. And again, I was reading the second installment in the series, and I'm thinking, oh my God, will it go stale now? It sure has to go stale, right? There's a limit to how long you can prolong the joke until it gets old. But no, there's an initiation process, and the newcomer comes, the third head bobs in on the top of your ceiling, and now they explain the rules. You have to be patient because Lord likes to sleep in the classroom, so don't interrupt him, etc., etc. Like, they find those small ways to reinvigorate the concept, and I really appreciate. Like, damn, that joke I really like done.
And so when you say that they, well, number one, there's several questions involved of why there's these catgirl ninjas in the modern world.
Yeah.
And why they have to follow the main character. But just like with many things in comedy, you don't really need an answer to that. The important part is just rolling with the punches, right?
Yeah.
And I really liked how you show in your examples how they're hiding on the roof, and the VN shows that by putting the sprites upside down and at the top.
Yep.
I love it when visual novels take advantage of their technical aspects to pull off jokes like those.
Yeah, exactly. I think the worst VN can say is describe something it doesn't show like that. So what I mean by that, let's say you have a conversation between 2 characters, one of which is protagonist, so it's your perspective. The other is a character you talk to. And then the narrator says, she looks sad, and she has the normal face. That creates such a dissonance between what is told and what you see. But on the flip side, if you say, yeah, they follow me all the time on the ceiling, and the VN acknowledges that and draws them upside down, that's when it hits, okay?
Oh, absolutely. I love how it's such an opposite example to Hatoful Boyfriend, which basically did nothing, and yet you could still feel the comedy from it. And this, when you have Nekunin, where the art is a prized aspect, and it's doing these cool parts with the implementation. And it has the voice acting too, of course, right?
Yes.
Kind of like opposite, but they're still very funny in its own way, right?
It's actually really interesting that you brought that example, because Hatoful Boyfriend kinda goes for the low effort, but it's so low that it becomes the joke, right? Yeah, you did the...
Sort of. Maybe not low effort, but low production quality.
Yeah, you're right. Low production quality, but that's the joke. That's the B-movie level. right? Whereas the Nekonin flips that and says, oh, no, we can acknowledge the jokes and try the best we can to present them.
Two polar opposites.
Yeah.
Also, Hatoful Boyfriend is technically about romancing pigeon boys, and Nekonin is all about cat girls, right?
True. Yeah.
Super polar opposites.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. And to be honest, I didn't plan for my example to be the opposite, so it's funny how that worked out.
Oh, that's hilarious. That jumped out at me.
Yeah. Dang.
Then on that note, I think we'll have to wrap up this episode of VNture Podcast. I am very glad to all of our listeners who decided to stop in, and I hope that you'll check out some of these VNs and have a laugh just like we did.
Yeah. I also hope you have a wonderful time with those VNs, and thank you to all our listeners. Take care and goodbye.